Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, and welcome back to Tarjuman. Today, I wanted to, well, in previous videos, I've sort of, in a sense, maybe walked us up to the ledge of the abyss, using logic to some extent, or, the end of logic, which you can see it either as this, fusing of all concepts into the one, but it's kind of, on the other hand, also an abyss because you can't distinguish anything or say anything about it. And there's kind of a, if you stop there, then you're kind of in you're in danger of sort of falling into a nihilistic sort of way of thinking, in the sense of kind of seeing the world as completely meaningless. Because all these concepts are no concepts are ultimately real in some sense. That's sometimes how it would, and it's some people almost see that as you can view that as liberating, which I think is good, but there's also a danger of seeing that as leaving you kind of rootless or floating or what have you. If all concepts ultimately break down, then what does anything ultimately mean? Is there any reality, et cetera, et cetera? And there's kind of in the West, we're sort of set up for that, unfortunately, because we've been sort of trained to think that the main or only type of knowledge that's really kind of powerful or compelling or authoritative is, especially when it comes to these type of questions, is this sort of logical truth. And so even in religious traditions where we're talking about God or what have you, or we're saying we believe in God, if you're only thinking in terms of logic and logical statements, and truth is about making correct statements about the universe or what have you, if you get to this point where, okay, well, we can't say anything about God because God is so beyond these categories of logic, then you're kind of left with this disconnection from God, because if you can't know God or say anything about God in this sort of logical way, then what are we left with? And I have to give a shout out to Professor John Vervaeke of the University of Toronto, who I've benefited a lot from in this regard, because he points out that there's many other types of knowledge that we have, including so there's what he would call the propositional knowledge, which is these statements about facts in the world that cats are mammals or what have you, and then you also have skills, how to do things. That's a type of knowledge. You have knowledge about what it's like to be someone or something in a certain role or in an environment. That's a perspectival knowing. And then also I would I don't know if he puts it in these terms, but I would sort of extend that even more to say, our biology is, has knowledge of a sort as well. Our bodies know how to repel disease, for instance, or, maybe you could call it existential knowledge, in the sense of, our bodies and our entire existence really is a product of the accumulation of knowledge, in a sense, or learning through evolution and other things, what have you. So just what we are is a type of knowledge. So we'll kind of come back to that, I suppose. So before we kind of get back to that, or we'll maybe end up there again, I suppose. First I wanted to one kind of one kind of note as we get back to this question of, once we kind of realize that all categories break down at the one or the abyss, sometimes it can be experienced as both, in a sense. What do we do? What do we do then? If it's if all the categories that we normally analyze things by break down at their most fundamental level, then is anything real? How do we know anything, etc.? And so and this is kind of the product of a, if we stop there and we sort of get stuck in that type of direction, then we're sort of letting only this very reductionist left brain logical type of thinking sort of spin its wheels and kind of run off the rails. And much of what religion is often is sort of trying to get us to not do that. It's trying to get us to sort of properly balance our ways of thinking and ways of relating to reality. So there's not one way to do this, or there's no it's not a simple thing, and it's not there's so many aspects to it, and so many it's a whole world. It's a whole world of what religion includes. So it's not like I can summarize or just give you the key to everything or something in here, but I can give what I want to share is some kind of tips and things that have kind of helped me. Excuse me, I'm kind of gassy. with kind of like dealing with the left brain's tendency to sort of crave omniscience in an almost neurotic way, like not feeling secure unless it can have like total and complete understanding of everything, and sort of this constant questioning, which don't get me wrong, that's extremely useful for many things. That type of attitude and habit can be very helpful, and can lead to a lot of knowledge and stuff. But if we let it sort of just spin its wheels, once logic reaches its limit, then obviously that can lead you into these weird reductive solipsism things where you're like, how do I know anything's real? How do I know anything's outside my head is real? How do I know I'm real? How do I know consciousness is real? Et cetera, et cetera. So I can share a couple things. If you have that type of thinking and you're kind of facing that sort of problem, one of the first things we can do is sort of turn that thinking back on itself. So, if we, just the idea of reaching this total transcendence or universal, the culmination of all these universals, universal concepts, patterns, that is, that concept also, being a concept also can be broken down. It also has, it relies on other concepts. It has a yin to its yang, if you will. I'm probably using that backwards, but I'm only a pedestrian to Taoism, so forgive me for that crude use of the terminology. But anyway, right. So the just in the sense, so the universals are concepts that we arrive at those concepts by looking at the particulars. We look at the particulars and we sort of see these patterns. This is red and this is red, or we don't call it red maybe at that stage, but these three things have a similarity, and we call that redness, and that that's and that allows us to sort of conceive of that pattern. At the same time, the pattern at the same time we're able to recognize things as red because it is participating in that group of things. So the universals rely on the particulars, and the particulars and understandability of the particulars also rely on the universals. So then that leads us to and we're going to maybe break quite heavily with the traditional Neoplatonism here in saying that the particulars are just as real as the universals. So it's not that it's not that the Neoplatonists tended to think that the particulars are imperfect and not as real as the universals, and maybe our inheriting of that is kind of what helped lead us in this direction. But anyway, so the universals are just as real as the particulars, and so we can then kind of have to maybe speak in religious language. We realize that as Allah is called in the Quran, both al-Zahir wal-Batin. Allah is both the apparent, the reality that is right up in front of us, and also the hidden realities. Both of those are part of the unfolding of God's attributes. So we shouldn't, getting stuck in the dunya means we're getting the lowest heaven, or the lowest level of creation, is kind of like thinking that these things, this reality in front of us is detached from God, and is, maybe just boring, mundane, kind of not sacred, or not, like we don't see the divinity and the beauty in it, right? And so part of our goal to be in a state of worship, the state of the worshiper, is to see the attributes of God playing out in front of us all the time, and seeing that even these kind of mundane things, boring things, what have you, are also a reflection of the divine reality. It's kind of like, what's the Carl Sagan quote, I think it is, where he says something like, we are the universe coming to know itself. There's a lot of parallels to that in the Islamic tradition. I think Ibn Arabi himself says something about how, a lot of Sufis reference this hadith Qudsi, a holy tradition, a statement of God himself, saying that, I was a hidden pearl and wished to be known, and so I created the universe, I created creation. So there's a way in which, like, we are part of that process of God knowing himself. So that's, that's one way of kind of approaching that, is thinking, well, okay, what are we? Okay, so if you reach the abyss or the one or what have you, where concepts all break down, et cetera, it's like, okay, if this world is meaningless, then how does it even exist? Like, to even claim that, there's so many other possible worlds logically. So, like, why would this one exist? It must be kind of like a reflection and a choice. There's kind of that idea of God creating out of his mercy and his love, because it's like, in the same way, as an analogy, logically, there's plenty of people in the world who you could theoretically, logically love, or what have you, but you choose to, kind of, you're drawn into, and you also choose to some extent, kind of who you love and who you learn to open up to and learn to appreciate, etc. So there's this kind of idea where, okay, in God's infinite knowledge of possibilities, like, he could have created anything, but he chose to create this world as it is. And so there's something very special and sacred about that. And that's, maybe we can talk more about that another time. But and then one other thing is, so again, with this tendency, with the left brain logic type of thinking, reductionist type of thinking, sometimes we'll get in this sort of way of thinking where, okay, how do I know anything outside myself? Like, I think, therefore I am, but then how do I know, the world isn't a simulation or something like that? And it's like, well, remember, we can break down these concepts. So even the concept of the inner and the outer break down. Like, if you are part of the process of the universe or what have you, why would your inner consciousness be different than what else is going outside, outside, fundamentally, that is? Why would it be, why would there be a fundamental break? So it's like, if you're real, if you're real, then of course what's going on outside you is real. You're part of the same thing. Unity, reality is one. You're in order for you're interacting with the outside world, and you can't just randomly choose for tables to disappear and reappear. So, like, those things, the things that we're perceiving are real, and of course we have biases and things like that. We are the product of, we are the culmination of a particular history of something. Our past light cone, to put it in physics terms. We are our past light cone. So, so everything else has a different light cone. So that's what makes us different. from, the reason I'm different from these books is because of their past light cone is different from mine. And so basically, yeah, like, if you really follow the logical breaking down to its own conclusion, you really push it and really kind of go with it. You sort of realize that when it seems like it's trapping you into some sort of, constricting reality, and the possibilities of knowing are being constricted or something like that, then you realize, like, well, that constriction is just part of the broader process of the universe, of creation or what have you. So you're not actually trapped. You're not actually, that you are an unfolding. You and everything around you are an unfolding of God's plan, God's knowledge, God's creativity, etc., etc. And was there anything else that I wanted to add to that? الظاهر والباطن, the outer and the inner. Solipsism, universal particular, knowledge types, the West. Yeah. I guess we just need to realize, kind of to tie it back to those knowledge types. Yes, of course, we want to use all of our knowledge types, all of our levels of knowledge. That is the logical, the speculative, the pattern recognition, etc. That's all good. We want to use our perspectival knowledge, knowing, understanding what it's like to be us, etc. is also powerful. And yeah, just knowing that our most fundamental type of knowledge is that existential knowledge. That meaning, we know by being, we know. By we have the fitrah. In Islamic terminology, in the Quran, it's often not really talked about in this way in more exoteric types of Islam, but I believe I'm sure there's Sufis who talk about this, but the Quran says fitratullah allati fatara an-nas alayha. So the primordial nature of God upon which human beings were planted. So it's like we are growing out of God's primordial nature. And of course, there's also hadith similar to the biblical story, the biblical idea of Adam being created upon God's form. And this, again, referring to, like, our deepest knowledge of God is just in what we are. We know it deep down in our most inner realities. And that's where that's where we can go to sort of, to get away, if we need to get away from, if we're find that we're being misled and being sort of getting caught up in other types of knowledge or other types of thinking or what have you that are giving us problems, we can sort of take refuge there and then find our faith in there and use that to sort of then branch out again. And ultimately you want to integrate all the levels, right? You want to integrate both your most speculative abstract knowledge and your collection of experience, collection of information, etc., with the skill, your skills of how to manipulate the world, how to manipulate concepts, and your emotions and all these things, and then with your biology and down to your existential, reality itself, down there at the foundation of things, at the foundation of all things, is the one.